Welcome to another episode of Nacoa's Lunchtime Lives, a series of live interviews with people that have advocated for COAs and Nacoa that goes out normally on our Instagram or our Facebook page live and then is set onto YouTube so that you can watch at your leisure. In this incredible episode, I speak to the amazing Pegg, who is the host of the podcast, The Hot Mess Mums Club. And in this episode, it's really powerful, really emotional. Kelly goes over lots of the things that she's experienced as somebody who grew up with an alcoholic mother and who Kelly eventually lost when she was just 19 years old. We cover loads in here, loads of different topics, and Kelly's really, really brave with her sharing. So there's a lot for COAs to take away from this, and I really, really hope that you enjoy it. If you haven't yet done so, please make sure that you have subscribed to our channel and you turn on those notifications so you know each and every time that we post a new video.
There you are.
You okay?
Okay, I'm very good. That was very easy. The easiest entry that we've had, I think, on an Instagram live.
I've been so nervous about it. I've done them before, but I'm not very good technically. So I thought, oh, if it goes wrong, I don't know what I'll do. I'm getting eaten by
the special guest? Who's the special?
These are my dogs, and the other one's Apollo.
Oh, lovely. They're not nervous. They're not nervous about today's live.
No, they just want to go for a walk, I think. Gonna have to wait.
Okay, well, look, I'm just going to introduce today's session, Kelly, and then I'll introduce you and we'll go with it. For anybody that's joining us that hasn't joined us before, we may have some new people today.
Yeah.
These are the lunchtime lives that we're doing regularly every week. Well, not every week. We're doing them fairly regularly for Nacoa, either on Instagram or our Facebook platforms. And we're just really speaking to people that are advocating for Nacoa or advocating for children of alcoholics in general. And in today's session, we are joined by Kelly. And I'm really excited about this. Well, I spoke to Kelly yesterday briefly about today. So I'm really excited about what we're going to get into today. So for anybody that doesn't know Kelly, I'm going to do a brief intro, but I think it'll be better if you do, if we get you to introduce yourself properly. Kelly has been a journalist and a radio presenter in the past, but today is best and most well known by her two dogs and for being the host of the Hot Mess Club podcast. Kelly, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Apart from getting eaten by the dogs. It's really lovely to be here. It was lovely to meet you yesterday and connect with you. And I feel really lucky, really, to have found you guys and to be doing this today as well, and hopefully making a bit of a difference.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely will.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And so why don't you tell us a little bit first before we get into the kind of Nacoa stuff? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast and about the Hot Mess Mums Club, how it came about and what the podcast is for anybody that doesn't know about it?
Yes, so I do a podcast called the Hot Mess Mums Club with my business partner, Jenny Powell, who used to do Wheel of Fortune and Top of the Pops, and she's, you name it, she's done it. And our podcast is about supporting mums and empowering them, basically. And being very real about all mum life and well-being, women's mental health, everything. So we've been doing that for a year now. And before that, I was a journalist and radio presenter for 15 years. So, yes, I'm a mum of two. I live in the countryside. Been married for a long time. And I'm also somebody who grew up around alcoholism my whole childhood. My mum alcoholic, and she died when I was 19. I'm 38 now, nearly 39. It killed her. So you know, it's yeah.
Yeah, of course.
But it's so weird to say it like this, and I know people are joining, which is brilliant. Sometimes when you say it out loud, it sounds so strange still, but yeah.
We just see Callum Best has just joined as well. Big patron and advocate for the work that Nacoa do.
Yeah.
So today I would like to talk. I'd like to talk about what that was like for you growing up. But initially, how did you come about Nacoa? It's always interesting to hear how you how people find Nacoa. You know, where you come across us.
Yeah, I know. Do you know, I found you on Instagram. It was that simple. And I was just immediately blown away, really, that there was something like this. Because when I was growing up, you know, at the height of me being a teenager and the height of my mum's drinking addiction, in the 90s, there was nothing like Nacoa. There was nothing really about mental health, children's mental health, women's mental health. So I found you on Instagram and just DM'd straight away, because it's something that in my older years, as I've got older, I've started to talk about and be more open about, write about. So it was just like, I just wanted to connect instantly, really.
Yeah, and I do think, you know, as you're saying that, I do think that's one of the most amazing things about Nacoa is they do have this kind of, you get this sense of almost finding your tribe instantly just by reading the words National Association for Children of Alcoholics. It's like, I remember for me when I first found them, it was like, wow, this is like a thing. Like I just didn't know when I was a child that there was other people out there experiencing what I experienced.
Yeah, definitely. It's like yesterday, we had about half an hour, and you know, it was so easy to chat to you. Got on so well because I think, you know, you just know you can say stuff, and I know you'll get it. You know, I get it. You feel comfortable with because you share something.
Yeah. So look, let's try and see if we can talk a little bit about some of your experiences then, and the things that you remember. So what was, you said that it was your mum that was an alcoholic. What's your kind of earliest memory of your mum and her drinking?
Well, so I think I was probably, my brother and I were very lucky. So we were brought up from our young years with our grandparents. So I was 2.5, my brother was a baby, because we weren't in an environment that was going to ever be safe for us. So but we did have contact with our parents, and we did stay with them at weekends and sometimes on holidays. So I was thinking about this morning. My earliest memory, probably from the age of about 6, I knew what alcohol was. I knew that it made people sleepy, tired, grumpy, that it made them not want to be around me as much. And, you know, it was things like when we would go on holidays, we used to go to the Isle of Wight, we would be on a beach and we would join a beach club because they would on the beach and drink and fall asleep. And we were so young, and it was talked about. Our grandparents talked about it with us. So, and we were different, you know, we were the only kids at school that lived with grandparents. We lived in a village, everybody talked. So people knew everybody's business. So, and I think at that stage when I was, before I was a teenager, her drinking got far worse when I was a teenager. It became phone right from the morning, all long, you know. So when I was smaller, there were times with her where I have some good memories. Her cooking, her dancing, when we used to go and stay with her. But there were other things. She was never there when I was poorly, you know. Never took me shopping for school clothes. We never did anything that I do with my daughter.
Yeah, and just to like, even to see you talk about that, you spoke a lot about like your kind of initial years and what you remembered there, right? And then the moment you get the opportunity to say her cooking, I even see when I'm listening to you, right, your face completely changes, right? And I think in a lot of ways that's some of the hardest stuff that we experience, right? Is that we get those glimmers. We get those glimmers of what our parents could have been, but then we have the kind of realization alongside that we didn't get to have that in the way that we should, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And do you feel like was there ever a stage where you realised that your kind of family setup, so the way that you were living, was not normal? And I know there's kind of no idea of what normal is, but that was different to the way that a lot of people were living.
Yeah, really. Yeah, totally. From primary school, really, because other kids
Yeah.
would tell you know, and
Yeah.
their parents would obviously say things that they would hear. So we were asked all the time, why do you live with your grandparents? You know, and stuff like that. We knew we were different. We knew that they didn't want us, you know, our parents didn't want us in their lives full time. We weren't part of a normal, what we saw our friends have. We didn't have that.
Yeah.
So from a very early age, I think, you know, from primary school, both of us knew that, my brother and myself.
And how did you try and word this question right? How did you internalize that as a child? Two things that I've sort of picked up that you've said already. You sort of mentioned that when your parents drank, they didn't, you know, it made them want to be around you less. And then you sort of alluded to the fact that you knew as children that your parents didn't want you full time. As a child, what did that feel like? How did you internalize that? How did you vocalize it to your brothers? And if so, how did you vocalize it?
It was rejection. I took it as rejection. And I think I treated my mum and my dad very different. My dad wasn't an alcoholic. He drank, probably too much, but he wasn't an alcoholic. And I don't know whether it's something that girls do, but I was really cross with my mum even when I was younger. So I remember having gastroenteritis, and my granddad was doing a night at work, doing a shift, and my gran didn't drive, and she couldn't get she called the doctor out, he came out, but she couldn't get to the pharmacy to get medication. So a friend of ours went for her because they were just nowhere to be seen. And then when my mum visited after work, you know, I was just so cross that she hadn't been the one that had been there and gone to the pharmacy, done all the things that your mum should do. So I always interpreted it as rejection, I think. I found it harder probably to get my head around it with my mum, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know why that was.
Did you when you say you got angry, did you express your anger to your mum, or was it something that was, I know a lot of people, like for me particularly, like in my family, it was always there. And I talk about the ways that I felt and being angry and feeling let down and all of those things. But as a child, what you saw was happy. Like I never got the opportunity. I never got angry with my mum or dad when I was a kid about it because we didn't talk. So it was all undertones. Did you get the opportunities to express it when you was younger?
Yeah, I think I did with her, but I never would with my dad. I worked and I made him out to be this amazing man because I wanted that. I had friends at primary school that had dads who they adored, and I wanted to have what they had. So I created him to be this incredible person. He was.
Yeah.
And I got angry with her, you know, because I think I saw her as weak, really, in the sense that, you know, they had a very difficult marriage. It was violent, and she, you know, she had so many issues, I think, and I suppose I thought that Adam and I should have been, my brother and I should have been enough for her to get out, to fix it, to change. And she had all the backing in the world. My nan and granddad, amazing people who just would give her so much support. And were teetotalers, never drank. So they found it so hard to understand why their daughter did.
You know, I speak to so many children of alcoholics that have grown up in this situation, and so many of them have literally been emotionally saved by a grandparent. It's such a common thing that And I think it's literally can be life-saving, you know, to have those kind of nurturing, safe adults within your life that gave you that opportunity. I feel like it must have been like, that must have been a huge blessing. But also what I always find, I don't know if refreshing is the right word. I think it is the right word. Refreshing when I speak to other people that have grown up with parents is when you have the ability to explore these difficult emotions, that feeling of being let down. I think a lot of us grew up in environments where we were sort of always, I was always told to leave those feelings alone and only spend time with how good my dad was. And so it's refreshing to hear you kind of talk about those feelings that came up when you was a child. Outside, did your school know? Did any of like the teachers know about your parents in primary and junior school?
I don't think at primary. I think questions were never asked, and because Gran and Grandad looked after us so well, we had all our school uniforms. You know, my nan used to do all the baking. They were there on sports days. They came on school trips. You know, we were well looked after, and normal, if you like. You know, there were no issues. So no. Secondary school was so different because we both moved in with my mum then. Her and my dad divorced and he disappeared, and I think we wanted to look after her, so
Right.
both moved in with her, me earlier than my brother, about a year earlier. And you know, it always sort of baffles me really why my secondary school never stepped in at all. I was a problem teenager, a truant, difficult, tearing the world up really, because I had no rules, no regulations, no safety. And I'd been introduced to alcohol by my mum as a sort of 13-year-old. I used to sit and drink with her in the evenings. I thought that was normal. And then it got way beyond that, in the sense that, you know, her drinking got so much I never saw her, so I could be out all hours, and I fell in with the wrong crowds. And you know, I shouldn't have been that way. And I'm sure, I think I said this to you yesterday, she would parents' evening smelling like a brewery. No ever asked. I was just, you know, I was told by my careers officer, you need to go into the army because you need to learn some discipline. There was no support. I just got
Yeah, I hear that line about going into the army to learn some discipline so much, right? And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but there's a big conversation to be had about how the army gets full of young traumatized individuals, by the way, who are pushed down that route.
Yeah.
As a way of kind of what you said, learning to have a better attitude and stuff when it's never about that. Someone's just said here, Pete's just a big Nacoa follower. My parents split when I was 13, 14, and my mum started drinking after that when I lived solely with her. My dad knew my mum was drinking, but I think he was ignorant to how bad it was. But that kind of highlights when you went from, so at primary school and junior school, before you went to senior school, as a student, you know, as a pupil at the school, what was your I don't like the word behavior, but what was your behavior like? What were you like as a pupil?
I was good, you know, I was quite sporty. I used to 3 times a week. I played netball, and I represented the school for it. I was fine. I did well, no issues. Nothing.
It's similar, because I was exactly the same. Up until senior school, I was the perfect pupil, the perfect student, and then when I went to senior school, that's when everything changed. The move that happened when you went from your nan and granddads from your grandparents to live with your mum, how did that come about? Was that something that you pushed for? Were your grandparents not happy about it, but felt like they had to let you do what you wanted? Or
Yeah, I mean, they lived in the same village, so they were still very much in my life. But I think, you know, because my dad had been removed from the situation, they probably thought it would be okay because, you know, she wouldn't be on her own. She got put in hospital when I was about 14, 15. My grandparents dealt with all of that. They tried to hide it from us, but they couldn't really, and we did go to the hospital with them, and obviously she was told that, you know, she'd been very lucky, but if it continued she would die. And I was full of rage for her, so angry. And they weren't. They paid off her mortgage, they bought her a new wardrobe and a new car, and they tried to get her back on track. When she came out of the hospital, I think her being sober lasted for about 2 weeks, and it was like treading on eggshells. I don't know anyone who's joining here who or maybe you recognise this, Josh, that if they all of a sudden think they need to stop but they don't want to, being around them is just the worst, because they snap, and you know, she would snap, she would be very difficult, she didn't want to spend time with anybody.
Yeah.
So I think they probably thought because we were there with her, it was better.
Yeah.
You know.
And look, the point you make about the walking on eggshells with when they stop drinking for whatever reason, I think is a really, really important point. And it's a massive point and something that's not widely discussed. There's this idea, and actually when Nacoa, when we began campaigning a few years ago to get proper funding for children of alcoholics, up until that stage, really, it was just thought that if you can get the parent to drink less or stop drinking, that's how you solve a child of an alcoholic's problem, that their problems just go away, as if our problems only existed when our parents were drunk, right? Which, as you've highlighted, you know, there as well, in just one of the ways, that walking on eggshell environment, I actually remember not just when they did sober periods like those 2 weeks, but I do remember the times when my dad just happened to be sober at some part of the day or whatever. That's where I really developed that hypervigilance, because they were some of the most difficult and frightening times, right? And I even remember as a child, you get to this stage where you start to think, I'd rather you had a drink.
Yes.
Right? And then you become so confused in your mind by, I want my parent to drink, yet I've always wanted them to stop, right? And I think that confusion for young children must be really, really difficult. When she drank again after the 2 weeks, was there rage again? I think you talked about rage. Was it rageful towards your mum?
My relationship with her during my teenage years was horrendous and non-existent, and she died. Basically, it was no better. You know, we'd had a row the night before she died, and I was furious with her in the hospital the next day as well, because she refused to tell the doctor on A&E the truth, and she kept telling me I wasn't an alcoholic. And I was so cross. My brother was much more kinder and sympathetic, because we were different. But yeah, the rage was there after she went back on it after the first warning in hospital, and it just got worse, really, and to the point from the age of about 18, that year before she died, that whole year was just, we didn't have a relationship. We would argue all the time, if I ever saw her. Because she would come home, she would take her drink to bed, she'd take a microwave meal to bed at 7, and we wouldn't see her again.
Yeah, and look, a lot of people, by the way, are just picking up on the idea, this thing of waiting when you're scared about when they're going to drink again, right? And the fear. I do think it's something that really resonates with people, because it's something we don't often get to talk about, right? You mentioned earlier, if we're talking to people that haven't experienced what we've experienced, even if they do create space for us to talk, they often want to know what it was like when your parent was drunk, because they think that's what the problem lies around that. And what you've talked about is this breakdown of relationship. I just want to touch on something that you said about with your brother. And obviously you can't tell your brother's story because your brother's story is different, but he reacted differently. How did that impact your relationship with your brother? Because from personal experience, I really struggled, particularly in my sort of late teens, early adulthood, even though my dad died when I was 9. I struggled with how differently my brothers seemed to react and to view what we experienced. Is that something that you kind of experienced, you know, as a sibling with your brother?
More so afterwards, actually.
Mm.
During, although we were very different, I was the bad child, the wild child, the truant. He was the A-star student, and the one that was always calm with her. We were still incredibly close, fiercely close. And I still am. He's 2.5 years younger than me, very protective over him. So him dealing with it differently during didn't really cause an issue between us, you know. It was more after, I think. Yeah. Because
and
he still doesn't talk about it.
He still doesn't talk about it. And how does that feel with you?
Sometimes I want to say things to him, you know. My mum was very musical. She loved music. It's something that I hold on to, a bit like the cooking, as a positive thing, that, you know, and a nice memory of mine. And sometimes, you know, there are things that remind me of her. I want to say something to him. If I message him, I never really know if he will reply or not. It wouldn't sit down, and he never came with us when we did our ashes either.
Yeah, we see. I've got sort of similar. Like my older brother, we're really, really close. Still play football together and everything like that. It's just something that we don't ever talk about, you know. And he sort of even sees the stuff that I do today, and there's no issue or friction there. But there are some times when I do just think, you know, I can feel a little bit on my own in that sense, you know. But what I do recognise is that we have two completely different experiences.
Yeah.
The nice memories that you have of your mum. When your mum passed away, you were 19 when your mum passed away?
Yeah.
Let's start if we can, and I know this might be difficult to you know, if it gets too difficult. How did you feel when your mum died, right? Because just to frame this a little bit, in a normal family environment where the parent wasn't an alcoholic, right? I think it's not, I don't want to say it's simple, it's not simple, but you've lost someone you love dearly, and you're about to go through the grieving process, right?
Yeah.
I don't think when you're talking about it in a year before you basically had no relationship, right? You felt rage. How did it feel when your mum died and you were 19 years old? I know that's a hard question.
I think it always initially felt like it was happening to somebody else. I think I knew that she wasn't going to last much longer. She was very frail, my mum. She was a tiny, tiny person. And the more she kept drinking, the less she ate. She didn't well. She wasn't very well. So my greatest fear was her dying, and the anxiety around that built up and built up. Obviously layered with all this rage and anger. You know, I'd gone to uni, I'd come back and quit uni, you know, because my brother was there and it wasn't easy for him, and there were so many different things going on. And then the whole thing around her death was really quite horrific. You know, we woke up to, I can't even explain it, but it was just like, it was a really not a nice scene. You know, her whole body was collapsing. So it was very traumatic, trying to get her into the car, get her to A&E. Then she was denying that she had a drink problem to the guy. At one point, I don't think she even knew our names. And we walked away from the hospital and we just said to each other, we're never going to see her again.
Wow.
And we knew that. And we knew that it would be so not very nice to be in the hospital. And obviously we weren't allowed to be at the time, you know, at that point with her. Yeah. Because she was hemorrhaging, you know, there was things going on, not to be but yeah, so it felt like it happened to someone else. And then I think I'd mentioned to you yesterday, immediately there's this shame around it. Don't tell anyone. My nana, bless her, do not tell anyone she was an alcoholic. Everybody knew. Don't use that word. That's not how she died. You know. Yeah. Oh, so you can't even say to someone how it happened.
Yeah, and I mean, firstly, I just want to say thank you for being able to share, you know, such a difficult experience in the way that you have there. And the way that you described it, it took me back to when I lost my dad. And, you know, I think what's different when you lose, and somebody, Debbie said in the comments that when she lost her parent, it was like grieving for the second time, right? Because it was like I'd lost my parent to this illness, and then you lose your parents.
Get that.
I think Debbie described it as lose your parent's body when the body died.
Yeah.
But even when you were talking, and what it did is it took me back to my experience with my dad, and it was that when I had a moment of when you said you came out of the hospital and you were like, we're never gonna see her again. My body, my emotions that I felt were based on my experience with my dad, which was like an almost a relief.
Yeah.
Relief. And it makes me emotional when I talk about it, because I don't know if many people would be able to comprehend feeling relief at losing a parent at such a young age. 19 is such a young age as well. And then you get that relief, which is often sometimes followed by a guilt of, why do I feel so relieved that it's finally over? Why am I, dare I say, and this is my personal experience, I'm not telling your story here, but my personal experience was, dare I say, almost happy that now I can almost start my life free of this.
Because it's a constant battle living with an alcoholic parent. It's a constant, you know, disappointment. It's a constantly painful process. It's not a normal life at all.
No.
And there is a massive, we say it now, you know, I've got 2 kids, and I often say to my brother, you know, I wish you could see them. And he'll just say, but you wouldn't leave her with them anyway. It's that thing of, yes, okay, you want to say these things, but in the real world, she wouldn't be seeing my children, because there's no way I would put them through anything that Adam and I have been through. So, yeah, there's a massive sense of relief. And you're right. How do you ever explain that to anyone? If you sat down and said that to a friend, they think you were an awful person.
Yeah. And this is, you know, it does take it on when you go on into the rest of your life. You've talked there about the family that you've got now. It's similar for me. I have these moments where I think about my dad, and I think, I wish he could see what I'm achieving now. But then the actual real part of me goes, thank God he's not here in the way that he was. You know, I think about my wedding, and I just think, like, I would have to be my dad. I would have to invite him and all of that stuff. And I think so many people that I see that are living their adult lives with their parents still in these scenarios, you know, that's why I always commend the absolute courage of some people that have to cut their parent out of their life.
Yes.
In a world, and particularly in our society anyway, a world that tells them that your parent is your parent and you should have them in your life no matter what, when some people are left with that the only option for their own well-being is to make that courageous decision, right? So and you can, the comments have gone, and all the love coming in when, you know, when you've talked about that part with your parents, I think is really important. Someone's talked, I'm going through this now, my mum is still here, but having experienced this too, knowing others have is very comforting. So thank you for sharing, especially the fact that you can't tell others' families. Yeah, so let's do a bit on that, because I do think it's quite a big thing. I remember as a teenager, I especially remember getting girlfriends at like 13, 14 and meeting their parents. And of course, at that age, the parents always say, oh, you got your mum or your dad? Like, oh, my dad's not here. And then you think, oh, they're going to ask, right? So let's say in your 20s, at that stage of your life, if anybody ever asked about your mum, because you were told to keep it a secret, right? You were told to not say the truth when people asked. Did you do that? Is that something that you've always done when people ask you about your mum? Let's start in your 20s, because I'd imagine it might be slightly different then to what it is now. So when you were in your 20s, what kind of reaction did you give when people asked you about your mum?
I would just say she was ill. She was ill for a long time. That would make them feel uncomfortable, so they wouldn't ask any more questions, because I didn't want to go there, you know, and didn't want to tell people. And I remember making friends with somebody whose mum died of breast cancer, and we were sitting chatting about it all, and I remember inside feeling really guilty because her mum lived, she would be there, and they'd gone through this horrendous time, and they'd been in, you know, a hospice with her, and just awful. And I remember thinking, I just cannot tell her how my mum died, because it's completely different. I felt guilty for that as well. So you know, and the shame thing, it's like and we shouldn't be ashamed, we should be able to say it, and it's absolutely okay to say it. You know, I want to be very clear about that. But back then in my 20s, you know, it was, the whole thing felt shrouded in shame. You know, I'd grown up feeling ashamed of my parents, of myself. Then I felt ashamed of myself because I couldn't fix her, couldn't save her. So many things. So yeah, I didn't tell people. It came later, really.
Yeah. And that is, shame is almost, shame, what you're talking about is slightly different to almost feeling ashamed. What you're talking about is that deep idea that what happened in your life and what happened in my life is wrong and it's bad, right? And I had a very similar experience to what you're talking about. I remember I was having a conversation, I was about 15, with a friend's parents' friend. And they were talking about addiction, and I said at 15 years old, addiction is just like dying from any other illness, and I said like cancer.
Yeah.
And I remember her saying to me, she looked me right in the eye, and she'd obviously lost someone to cancer, and she said, they're nowhere near the same. You don't choose to die by cancer. And I can remember as a 15-year-old being like, wow, that really like hit me in that shame-based part of me, yeah, where that really shut me down. I never talked about it going on for the next 10 years after that. I never openly talked about my dad and the way that he died because of that moment, which is kind of similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, and it's I mean, so, you know, some people say alcoholism is a disease. I know other people who say it's not, but it's an escape, fear and things that frighten you. I've had people tell me it's hereditary. It can be genetic. There are so many different things out there. That whole thing to do with, you know, being able to say it and people to understand that it is still painful and it is still like a slow death. Because you know, as a young person, when you watch them drink and their drinking gets heavier and it gets worse and their lives become more and more evolved around it until it's just them and that.
Yeah.
You know they're going to die. I used to have conversations with my nan all the time about how long we thought she was going to live. Will she get to 50? She didn't. She was early 40s. But we used to time, will she get to 50?
Yeah.
How can we stop it, etc. So it is like a slow death, and I think that people that do it are incredibly selfish. I've got to say that. You know, I felt my mum was incredibly selfish, but I also know that she was incredibly ill.
Yeah. And I think that illness and I talk as somebody who went on to have problems with alcohol myself, I think that illness makes you selfish, right? Yeah. And I think what's really important conversation to have is the conversation that you've just had there, which is what you've said about being selfish and stuff, you say with the utmost compassion and kind of the willingness to understand. But as a child, and I still do this, even as someone who went on to have the same problem, I still say, how could you do that to me? Yeah. Right? Why wasn't I good enough? Yeah. Why couldn't you stop? And I don't think that question will ever go away. I think people do a lot of rationalizing as a way of trying to pretend it isn't there. Like my dad was ill. He had an illness and all of that stuff. All of that stuff might be true. And I still feel that stuff doesn't go away. And I think it's something that we have to live with. When did it start to change for you? Because clearly now, right? We've been talking for 40 minutes on a live Instagram. When did it change for you to start being more open about it?
Properly, probably in the last 5 years, I'd say, last 5 years. But when I met my husband, you know, I married him when I was about 30 and had my daughter, but I used to be able to talk to him. And that was probably the first step, having him to talk to about it, having someone to listen, becoming a parent, I think, changes you as well. And then I decided to talk about it one day on the radio. About 4 years ago, I did a breakfast show, and I just it came up, and I just did it, and the reaction that we got was, you know, something I didn't expect, really. So I used to write for a regional paper, so I decided, right, okay, I'm going to write about it. You know, get a reaction like that on radio, and there are people out there that get this and that feel it and they've got experience similar, then I'm gonna write about it as well, and I'm gonna you know. So, and then with the podcast, we've had various different guests on, and some who have battled, female guests who've had battles with alcoholism and an so during the podcast recordings, we've talked about that, and I've been able to, so it's come with an age thing, a confidence thing, but the need really to stop anybody feeling the way I have in my, especially my teenage years and my 20s, where you just feel like you can't talk to anyone, you shouldn't talk to anyone. You know, I've kind of become more, the realization that you've got to, if you don't speak out about it, we don't break stigmas, we don't pull down walls, we don't support people. So I think that's where it's came from.
And I the what, sorry?
You get braver when you get older, I think.
Yeah, well, I think there is a bit of that, but I also think the parenthood thing's a massive thing as well, because you get this sort of big bundle of joy stuck in your arms when it's first born, right? And then all of a sudden you start, I don't know, relating to this baby as what you were, and then you start thinking, I mean, your first thoughts, right? I never want this child to go through what I've experienced. I never want that to happen. And then I think that grows, and you start seeing children everywhere, and you start thinking, I don't want this, you know, nobody should have to experience it. And when studies show that 1 in 5 children are potentially living with a parent that drinks hazardously, I think we need as many people that feel confident enough to be able to speak in this way, to be doing it. So to have used your platform in the way that you have, and I think people are always surprised at the reaction they get. You do it and you put it out there, and then you think, oh my, everyone's going to cane me for this, right?
Yeah.
And then
me.
And Holly said here, right? You worry about that blame as well, right? You worry that people are going to start saying to you, why didn't you save them, right? And there's a lot of that comes up. So I think when we find the courage to do it, I think it's a huge thing. Something I did want to ask you, we still got 15 minutes. What's your relationship with alcohol been like in your life?
So, as I mentioned earlier, introduced to it from a very young age. You know, all my friends thought it was really cool that I was 14 and drinking with my mum. They thought it was great. So drank all through my teenage years. And then in my 20s, you know, I would go out like you do, and I would drink, you know, on nights out with friends. I liked it. I liked wine. I liked Prosecco. You know, I liked having a good time. And then I've become more and more health conscious over the years, and I have changed massively since I've had my kids as well. I'm aware of how easy it is as a mum to become sucked into this whole of, oh, I've had a bad day, I'm going to have a glass of wine because I deserve it, because the kids, I mean, we make fun out of it. We make memes out of it. You know, there are people on Instagram that post things about it. It's so, alcohol is so acceptable. We celebrate everything with it, even though it's poison. all these things. And then just before lockdown, ironically, I started to have different feelings. I wasn't drinking a lot at all, but just one glass of wine, if I was out with my husband and we're having a meal, would make me feel really poorly. Didn't like it. And I was going through something and it was really odd. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I think about my mum, and I think about what it did to her, and I think about what I want for my kids. And all of a sudden I said to my husband, I'm done. My husband doesn't drink. He's a teetotaler. You know, he'll just have a little bit here and there if he's out, but he's not a drinker. And I just thought, no, I don't want it. I don't want it in the house. I don't want it in my life. I don't want to celebrate with it. I don't want to commiserate with it. I don't want to have it as this acceptable thing. I don't feel it is. So that was it. So I haven't had a drink since the beginning of March. Never felt better, and I never think about it. And I'm more than happy to sit in a pub and have an orange juice, and it don't bother me.
Yeah.
I've done a full circle.
Yeah, that's incredible, really, that you just stop like that as well. But I think what's really important as well is there's this massive grey area that has been left kind of untouched in just in general, really, within our society, right, where we've made alcoholism very, very binary, or any addiction very binary, where you stop if you're drinking out of a paper bag on a park bench, right? That's when you stop drinking. Otherwise, you're not an alcoholic, and so you just need to learn to control it. So to have been somebody who, I mean, would you have classed yourself as in the term alcoholic at that stage when you stopped?
No, I mean, oh God, I'm talking maybe a glass of wine a week.
Yeah.
I didn't like the control it had over me. So I would, you know, think going back sometimes after a long day with the kids, oh, I'm just going to pop to the shop and get a bottle because it's been hell today, you know. And I started to think about the fact that it was it has a control, even if it's only small. You know, I get drunk, haven't been drunk for years, can't deal with the hangovers or anything like that. You know, now I have kids, but there was still something there that I wasn't comfortable with. And my husband always says it to me: "You're not your mum. You're not your mum. You're not your mum." But my greatest fear is that I would be, and I've been away from that for a long, long time. So, you know, I think it's so easy to fall into that trap. I don't know. I'm sure people can have a healthy relationship with it, but I wasn't sure that in the end I would have. It always bothered me, and it felt like the right thing to do, really. It just felt so good.
Yeah. And that's, you know, I think that's really important for people to understand, that you can just quit alcohol because you don't want to drink it, right?
Yeah.
Holly's saying she can relate so much with you, by the way, and has been saying it throughout the whole thing. I don't know how much you've kept up with the comments. What I wanted to ask you as well is, how old are your children now?
So my daughter's 7 and my son's 2.5.
Okay, so your daughter's 7 now.
Yeah.
Do you talk to them about your mum? Do they know about their nan?
They know the nice things, and they have teddies that were hers, that were handed to me, that I've handed to them. My daughter has a photo of her framed in her bedroom, and you know, we just at the moment I've only ever told her that, you know, she was very unwell.
Yeah.
There will come a day when we will have that conversation. I'm not sure, you know, to be older, but I will be telling her the truth. I want her to be aware of those situations, you know, when the time is right and she's old enough to understand that, both of them. And it's sad, you know.
Yeah, it's one of the big things that I say, that my kids don't know who their granddad is. They just know that he was a poorly man. I mean, I've talked, my eldest is 14 now, so we've had conversations about alcohol and what happened to my dad. And of course, with the work that I've done, they kind of know about my situation as well. But I do think that honesty is really important, right? And you know, my eldest daughter's now at the age where I start every weekend, all I think about is whether she's been drinking when she's out, and what I want to know what she's like, and what's your relationship with alcohol. And I do think there's a massive conversation to be had there in society in general, in addressing relationships in general with alcohol.
As well, we were saying this yesterday, how they treat you when they know, oh, did you have a problem, is that why you don't drink? Why drink. And I have a friend of mine who's been sober for more than a year, and she put all the money away, you know, that she would spend on alcohol.
Yeah.
5 grand in a year.
Yeah.
A penny jar. And even now when she goes out, her friends call her boring. Her friends say to her, just have one.
Yeah.
Says, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
We talk about it a lot because, you know, it's incredible that.
Yeah, listen, I would say the ones that feel the need to tell her that she's boring because she doesn't drink probably have a slight relationship with alcohol going on somewhere that they don't want to address.
Yeah.
And every time she goes out and don't drink, it holds a mirror up to them
Yeah.
about their own relationship. And I think that that's calling her boring is an outward expression, because alcohol is the only drug in the world that when I tell people I don't have to do, that I don't do, I have to explain why I don't do. Do you know what I mean? As soon as I say I don't do it, they go, they take a step back. It's like, oh, why is that then? Are you all right? What's wrong?
What's
and
wrong?
then, yeah. And then they want you to have one.
Yeah, our next door neighbours, when we moved, they're so nice. But he was like, I'm going to bring some, because it was obviously COVID. I'll get the glasses of wine out and we can have wine over the fence. And I said, I don't drink. Why? And then he said, oh, my wife didn't when the kids were small either, because, you know, you've got to. There has to be a reason. And, you know, but he never said, I'll put the kettle on, we'll have a coffee over the fence. It's like, you're not in.
Yeah, it is. It's so true. And that is the reality that you're dealing with. Yeah. And even with, you know, I say this with good, I want to use the word normal again, but good, normal people. You start having conversations with them and you realise, like, they can't compute this idea of not using this drug, right? Not using this drug, yeah? And I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but even when you look at what the world is going through at the moment with the whole pandemic and everything like that, right? It was a rush to get the pubs open, was the first thing that we needed to do, right? And yeah, and now me and my wife can't stand at the gates and watch my daughter start school at 4 years old, but I could go and sit in a pub tonight, shoulder to shoulder with a load of people and get boozed up and breathe all over each other, right? And I think,
makes money, you know. Like, that's a simple. For who cares about people's health or you know, kids' mental health? It makes money. It's horrendous.
Yeah,
it's, you know,
it has an overriding hold, I think, on our society as a whole. And I think there's two sides to that as well, because there's always that kind of, it comes back to that belief that when we're talking about anyone that has a really difficult relationship with it, people always go, well, yes, I had a difficult relationship with it, but when I, you know, did this, I stopped. And then you get these blurred areas where nobody gets to explore their true relationship because you make it so binary. It's an awful substance. Alcohol is an awful substance. We're sort of, I'm aware of time now, so we've got like 5 minutes. There's a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. I will invite people that are still in here, if they have any questions, to fire them in, and I can get Kelly to answer them quick fire. The big question, I guess, is what would you say to, I'm gonna kind of be specific as well, a young person. What would you say to a young person who's, let's say, between the ages of 9 and 15, that might have been living in the same environment as you? What would you say to them?
I would say, don't feel ashamed. Don't feel like it's your fault, because it isn't. And on to that, because it definitely isn't your fault. Reach out to someone. Nacoa, someone at school, tell somebody and get some support for you. Everybody who has an addiction, the only person who can stop the addiction is that person that has it. You cannot. So it's you that matters and your well-being. So don't be ashamed. Don't think it's your fault. And talk to somebody and know that you will be okay. You can be okay. You know, from being told that I was going to be, I had to go into the army and I was a no mark who'd never make anything of myself, I turned my life around. You know, I've worked on national radio, I've been a journalist, I've done TV. I worked hard for that. You know, I think all my teachers thought I was just going to end up in jail, but I proved them wrong. So it doesn't matter what you come from, it's about you. You know, you can be anything you want. So never give up on that, because that's really important, because you can't live for your parents and you can't live to fix them. They have to fix themselves.
So I don't think we could have a better answer to that. You know, from not being able to control your parent to you matter. And I think that's kind of epitomizes the message that Nacoa has been bringing. And I should probably mention, Nacoa's been around now for, I think, nearly 30 years, right? So, yeah.
Oh, that, George.
Yeah, no, nearly 30 years. But of course, back in the day, certainly before the internet, there was lots of different struggles. Nacoa over the time has faced lots and lots of different struggles. I'll tell you one of the biggest struggles, even 6 years ago, less than that, 4 or 5 years ago, when we first began campaigning for proper support for children of alcoholics. We stood up in the Parliament at the first ever meeting around it, and most alcohol charities told us that we shouldn't be helping children in isolation, that we shouldn't, unless their parents reach services, then you can't and shouldn't help and support the children. That was 4 years ago. That was the general narrative. Nacoa have blown that out of the water. Nacoa have blown that out of the water by the community spirit that it has online. People like you and every other child that's been affected by a parent's drinking that comes into the tribe online. And we started the kind of messages of, you know, you're not alone, right? You can't control this. This isn't your fault. The exact message that you've just given. And listen, things are changing now, and they're changing dramatically as a result. So I'm going to wrap it up, because Instagram does this horrible thing where it'll chuck us out bang on time if I don't wrap it up nicely. This has been incredible. I hope you've kept up and seen some of the comments that are coming through. Yeah, I hope you have. Because
some things, I think I was worried if I multitask, I'll get a bit confused looking at things.
Yeah, and that was true as I was listening to you. I didn't want to kind of interrupt you. The comments are there, everybody can see them. I know that you were kind of acknowledging them. I know that you were acknowledging them as they went, and I just think that's really, really important. So I just want to say that I'm really, really grateful. Genuinely, I think this has been really, really powerful. It's clearly helped a lot of people. This will go on the Instagram page, on the IGTV page, and it'll also go on our YouTube channel very, very soon. So Kelly, from the bottom of my heart and every COA's heart, I want to thank you. You've got 1 minute 48 seconds if you want to add anything before we cut out.
Oh, well, just thank you to everyone that joined and all your lovely messages. It means a lot. And thank you to you. I think you're incredible, Josh. I only met you yesterday.
Thank you, yeah.
The fact that you've lived through what you have, but now you're using it to help others, because it can be really hard to be in that sphere all the time.
Thank you.
You know, we're all so lucky to have you and Nacoa. So it's been really special to talk to you and meet you and hear your stuff as well, and your story. And thanks for having me.
Thank you. Listen, everything that I've got has been born out of finding Nacoa. 1 minute left. Can you just tell everyone where they can find the Hot Mess Mums Club podcast?
So we're on Instagram at the Hot Mess Mums. So you can find us on there on our Instagram page, and we're on all the podcast platforms, Apple, iTunes. Just plug us in, subscribe for free and download. And we've got a website as well if you Google it in.
Perfect. If they Google Hot Mess Mums, they're going to find you. They'll find you on Instagram. The internet is a lovely place now for being able to do that.
Yes.
Thanks again. Let's keep in touch. And I'm looking forward to what we can achieve together, you know, as part of the Nacoa tribe.
Definitely. Thanks, Josh. Thanks.
All right.
Have a lovely
Thank you. And you take care.
Bye.
Bye.